I'm your Gemini friend. So this video is going to be about Chiron in Aries and in the first house. There is a difference between these two placements, so I will differentiate between them, but Aries and the first house have the same common theme. If you have Chiron in Aries, this is more internal. It's more about your relationship with yourself and who you are, while Chiron in the first house is a bit more external, not to say that it's more shallow, but it's less about your personal relationship with your identity and more related to your presentation. Obviously, I'll break these both down further into the video, but just want to clear that up. So as far as what Chiron represents, I have a video in the description that goes much more over the energy of Chiron and this wounded healer, this wound that we experience, a pain, something very vulnerable for us that we can actually use to heal other people. This can be our greatest weakness, but at the same time, our greatest strength if we work through it. And I do offer personal natal chart readings and synastry readings, link in the description for that, but let's get into this. So, Chiron in the first house strongly ties this Chiron healer energy to your self-expression. It's almost like embodying this in a way. There are many healers and spiritual teachers with Chiron in the first house. So this can represent natural leadership, charisma, influence, and like a natural teaching ability. But this is more in its healed stage. Before this part of you is healed, there can be a lot of being preoccupied with your appearance, with the way that you're being received by other people, with the way that you are expressing yourself, and your overall identity, like who you are in the world, who you're showing up as, your self-image. There can be a strong sense of perfectionism here because whether you have Chiron in Aries or the first house, there is something involving your identity, your sense of self, and overall the feeling of being allowed to be yourself and to show up as who you really are. It can feel like who you are is wrong, like you are naturally lacking in some way, not enough. And there can be a need for validation from other people. It can feel like your opinion alone is not adequate. You need input. You need to be constantly checking with other people to find how they're perceiving you. You could be literally preoccupied with like your reflection, your appearance. You might be always wondering how you're coming across and have that outside perspective be like constantly present in the back of your mind. It can feel like your appearance, or it doesn't have to be about the way that you look, but it's about how you're appearing, the way that you're showing up for other people. You can feel the weight and the heaviness of this. It's because you know that you do have natural influence. But if you're comfortable with yourself and comfortable with the way that you're presenting, this comes across. If you're uncomfortable, that comes across as well. Not to make you any more self-conscious, but you want to focus on feeling comfortable within yourself because that's going to extend outwards. And there really is no right answer. When it comes to Aries energy, this is very blunt. It's direct. It just is what it is. There's like no questioning it. Aries just is. That's why this is the first house, because it's the very beginning. It's attached to the ascendant. It's who we are before all of the rest of the complexities within our chart. It's just like straight up, this is the way that we're approaching life, the way that we're coming across, and people's first impression of us. So if it's genuine, if it's matching that Aries directness, that just be without overcomplicating it, that aligns naturally with who you are. It's about getting in touch with who you really are in the way that you really want to be presenting yourself, because you're not wrong. There can just be a lot of external factors or internal disruption that makes it feel like you're wrong or feel like you're doing something that is unacceptable in some way. So what both of these Aries and the first house have in common is that you are able to empower and heal others through your self-acceptance first, through becoming very comfortable within your essence, because that comfortableness, it can energetically permeate other people and make them feel like they can also be themselves, be fully comfortable around you. It's like the more that you embrace and accept yourself, the more that other people can also feel like they are able to. But it does involve a healing journey. And this is all about your relationship with who you are. And it's like shedding what's not true to you. And with this Chiron energy being so present in your chart, there can be a really strong need to ground this energy, to figure out how to utilize it in a positive way, because you are a channel for this energy. And when it's something that you don't understand or consciously manipulate, things can get very mixed up. Chiron is an electric energy to some extent. A component of it is the electric Uranus current, the flow, which is strongly related to who you are naturally. And when it's in Aries energy, and I'm really using Aries and the first house interchangeably because the overall energy is so similar. Just recognize which parts are more particularly for you. But this energy in its natural state, like I said, it just wants to be. So when it's not being properly channeled, it will also have that sort of explosive quality to it where it's just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? There's a compulsive factor to it. So it's really important to focus on healing, on self-healing, and then what you can do for other people. Because when it's in such a prominent placement, this is something important for who you are as a person. Of course, everybody has their personal makeup of everything within their natal chart. But Chiron is a very important part of us because it shows us our place in society, our role as a helper of others, and what we can really do for other people with our own pain. It gives importance to the way that we've suffered. And when it's connected to your identity, or even just to your appearance, like, that might sound shallow initially, but it is devastating to have to be constantly aware of issues within your relationship with yourself or within your appearance. That's something that is constantly there. You're always here. You are always you. So fixing that relationship with yourself it's crucial. It's like a constant undercurrent. But this just gives you more growth opportunities, more frequent opportunities to work on your relationship with yourself or any issues that you have regarding the way that you're coming across, and like regulating just how much other people's input really means to you. Because looking at the opposite sign of Aries is Libra. This is the 7th house opposite the 1st house. And Libra and 7th house energy represents other people. There's a strong desire to have harmony within the community, within your relationships. And that can be where a lot of this distress comes from over considering harmony, validation. That people-pleasing tendency, if you have it, it shouldn't be in the forefront. It's not particularly helpful for you. Unless otherwise indicated in your chart. Of course, we can have layers of complexity and contradictions within just one person. But with Chiron and Aries in the 1st house, your own independence and your ability to assert yourself and to really stand your ground and like know what your ground is to begin with. It's important to have that very solid foundation within yourself. And this is ultimately because, like I mentioned, the influence that you have on people. Aries energy can serve to empower others. When you're very sure of yourself, it kind of adds more weight to your opinion, and people who might be struggling with self-confidence, if they see your confidence and you are affirming them, it means so much. So this is why it's so important to build up that self-confidence and just have a sense of self that is coming from a place of really knowing who you are and knowing who you want to be and knowing what you want to do. I mean, this can be a very goal-oriented energy. And since it's Aries, it doesn't have to be a single goal. You can be more general about your goals in this way, but it's more about taking that initiative, about starting. Just getting started in the first place, being decisive, and embracing vulnerability. Because one thing about Chiron in Aries and 1st house energy, it's the wounded warrior archetype. And one thing that comes with warriors is that they know that they need to stay on guard. They can't just be vulnerable and weaken their ability to win the fight. So vulnerability could really not come naturally to you. It could be something that you consider to be weak or unnecessary, but this goes back to that instilling confidence in other people. When you're willing to be vulnerable with someone, it shows them your weaker side, but your more human side, which can, through affirming fears that you might have, a lack of confidence that you might have, this can make other people feel better about their own difficulties within themselves. I mean, that is the goal of this energy. It's your confidence helps other people with their confidence. But if you're not experiencing what it feels like to not have confidence, to not be able to take initiative, to feel bad about yourself, to be very self-conscious, to feel inadequate or like you always have to be perfect and on top of everything. If you haven't experienced that, then you don't know what it's like, and you won't be able to help others from that first person perspective, from experience. Chiron is all about teaching from experience. And another thing that can come with wounded Aries energy is anger or aggression. This can be a total suppression of it, like you never get angry, you never become assertive even. Anger could be extremely unattractive and off limits for you, or anger could be the only thing that you comfortably express. Like sadness might be totally unacceptable, but at least you can express your feelings. You can get something out when you're angry. So whether anger is way too comfortable or completely uncomfortable, it's very important to just focus on your relationship with your emotions overall, but anger especially, aggression, assertion. Assertion is a positive form of this, so long as you're not over-asserting yourself. But as with everything within our charts, balance and understanding the most healthy expression of each energy and how we can embody that, that's the goal. But what can also come from this is experiencing aggressive or controlling or angry behaviors from other people. This could be something that you're very familiar with early on in life, especially since Aries and first house energy has so much to do with the way that we come into the world. It's very initial, immediate energy. So childhood, the way that you were introduced to other people, socializing, yourself, your very concept of self might not be your own. It's so important to make sure that how you feel about yourself is how you actually feel about yourself, not how you were told to feel about yourself, or even just like what you picked up off of the people who had authority over you. This can also indicate issues with authority figures, but it's important to make sure that you have a good balance with like being controlled versus being controlling. And this is very personal within your energies. I mean, if you have a ton of blunt placements already, then you might want to work on your bluntness, but typically being direct, being honest and straightforward is very helpful with this placement. And when it comes to seeking validation, you could go the opposite direction and be overly independent, maybe not want to take anyone's opinion. I mean, mixed messages can be really confusing with this. That's why that core solid sense of self is so important. I mean, all of the underlying energy that can come with this placement, it is important to have an outlet. Like if you're able to physically express this energy, whether through like moving your body, healthy activities, maybe even screaming into a pillow, I don't know, beat up a pillow if you need to, but understand that the way that you are feeling about yourself is really tied to your relationship with other people on a very collective level. Like as far as your role in society, it is so important that you feel good about yourself and you know yourself, and that your presentation and your sense of who you are, your identity, is coming from who you really are, who you have always been. There can be so many layers that we need to peel off because, of course, society puts expectations on us. The people who have authority over us early in life have their expectations. There are so many things that can get so messy and confusing, our sense of self and our identity. So nothing wrong with experimentation, like no pressure to immediately be yourself, be fully yourself. Like, experiment, see what feels good, try on different identities, so long as they feel like they might be true to you. It's a part of that vulnerability, making mistakes, allowing yourself to be wrong, because that's another thing with this energy, is that Aries can become very tied to its stance, and the idea of not being right about something can feel threatening. This can cause like defensive behaviors or a overly strong attachment to your ideals. So I'm gonna mention balance again, but ultimately you should feel right in your body, in your self, your identity. It should feel right. And this sort of thing can morph too. Like, you don't have to stay stagnant. You don't have to be the same person always. You don't have to identify too strongly with something. Like, say you've always had this haircut. If something becomes your identity, something that isn't actually like core and true to you, you don't have to cling to it. These are just vessels anyway. Your body is not who you are. And I think it's more important to focus on that initiative and on taking action rather than staying stagnant. Of course, this is very personal, but I'm just not wanting to encourage any sort of over-identification with something external, especially if you have Chiron in the first house. Who you are, it should be allowed to change, because we're all growing, we're all transforming. That's ideal. We should be changing throughout life. And when I say who you have always been, this is really paying attention to like the inner child, the you before you were conditioned. If you even got that chance to know yourself without external input. But it can be that with this placement, you need to dig, peel off layers, and figure out who you were, who you are underneath all of that. And it can be so helpful to look at yourself from an outside perspective, not in the way that I was describing before, where like you're having constant observers. It's not about being observed. It's about looking at yourself with compassion, maybe from the eyes of someone that you know loves and accepts you, or look at yourself the way that you would look at somebody who you love and accept unconditionally. Making mistakes, perfectly fine. Being vulnerable, try it, and have that self-compassion. Accept yourself. Like, of all the things that I've said, the most important thing with this is to accept yourself, to accept the way that you really are, because who you are, who you have come into the world as, is who you were meant to be. This is exactly who you were meant to be. I know that everybody goes through all sorts of horrible things, like the struggles that you might have been through. Nobody can even know. Nobody knows but you. But regardless of the way that you have lived your life up until now, handled things, you should be able to forgive yourself, have compassion, and accept that this is who you have been and who you really are. It's always free to come back to that. And I do know that being controlled, being powerless can be an issue here, but it's very, very important that you see your own power and you recognize the things that you do have control over, and that you're not limiting yourself in any way that you could otherwise not. Because we do limit ourselves all the time with just the things that we believe that we're able to do, that we should be allowed to do, that it's acceptable to do. These are all ways that we limit ourselves. But you have the right to assert yourself. And with this placement, our flaws, they become our greatest strengths. Really, every Chiron, it's about turning pain into strength, into healing. I just don't want to discount or discredit any pain or difficult situation that you might be in. But this is a very personal thing. It's very strongly tied to you as an individual, your independence, your desires, your interest. It's quite straightforward. It's not simple or easy, but my message here is it's pretty straightforward. So I hope that this is helpful, and I absolutely hope that you're able to empower yourself and then empower others, heal others and their own sense of self-confidence and self-worth, because you wouldn't be who you are if you weren't meant to be. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's about internalizing and integrating the idea that there is nothing wrong with you. So feel free to let me know what you think, if you have this placement, whatever. I'm gonna be focusing on this series, but if something else comes up that I want to make a video on, I will. So thank you so much for watching. I really, really, really appreciate you. Every single one of you, thank you. I love you. Bye.